This is the School Success Podcast, a podcast for school leaders to learn from other school leaders what's working and what's not, and to get inspiration and encouragement, as well as strategies to grow school enrollment, connect with families, retain teachers, recruit teachers, and everything in between. You guys are heroes, and I cannot thank you enough for pouring into this next generation that's coming behind us. My goal is you will take at least one thing away from every episode that you can take back to your school to make it better than it is right now. Please enjoy the School Success Podcast. This podcast is brought to you by the Herzog Foundation.
Time for school.
Hey, School Success Makers. Welcome to another edition of the School Success Podcast. I'm your host, Mitchell Slater, and I'm joined by a new friend out of Grand Rapids, Michigan, Sean Nolan, who is the headmaster of Sacred Heart Academy, of course, in Michigan, and came across him on, I think it was LinkedIn is how we first got connected, but hopped on a call, got to know a little bit about his school and what they're doing there, and I was like, we got to have an episode all about this one. So this one will be a fun one as usual, guys, but before I take any thunder away from him, I'm going to pass it off to him to introduce himself. So Sean, welcome to the podcast today, sir.
Mitchell, thank you so much for your time, and thanks for the invitation to join this podcast. It's really wonderful. So quick introduction. I've been an educator for about 12 years. I started in education teaching theology and Latin at a local Catholic high school. I'm in my second year now as the headmaster here at Sacred Heart Academy. My kids have been here about 8 years, so it's fun to work in the same school where my kids are, and they're thankfully young enough that I'm not weird, and they actually like associating with me still in public or in school, so that's wonderful. My studies have been especially around history, philosophy, theology, so I have a master's degree in theology, a master's degree in philosophy, and a master's degree in educational leadership. So this is a wonderful opportunity to put those things together and really think seriously and at great length and work at great length in building a beautiful culture in a Catholic school.
Love it. Well, man, thank you for taking time out of your day to be on the podcast today. We're going to have some good topics. I know we've talked about what we're going to talk about today, so that'll be a fun one. But before we dive into all that, my question I give everybody before we start, it's a fun one to get started on, is if I was to visit in Grand Rapids, Michigan, what would you say, Mitchell, you need to eat this and do this to experience Grand Rapids, Michigan?
We are like Beer City, USA. So as far as eating, that's not a food, but we have tons of craft brewing. Like Founders Brewing is in Grand Rapids. So you should go to a local brewery, not Founders because you can buy their stuff elsewhere, but local place. Like the Sauvigard is a cool little place. City Built Brewing has cool beer. Lots of little breweries all in Grand Rapids. You should definitely go to one, drink their beer, eat their food. There's many. There's on bike trails. It's awesome. A thing to do, I think, is the Frederick Meyer Gardens are a really beautiful experience. So it's a big indoor and outdoor garden. The butterflies, we actually went last week. The butterflies are out right now. So they release thousands of butterflies into this huge space. So it's a really beautiful thing. And it's Grand Rapids, so we're on the river. So I'll say two things. The other one is there's a nice river walk downtown. That would be a really beautiful. It's on the river. It's, the buildings, all the things. So it's a cool experience.
Okay, thank you. See, I'd use this if I was ever to visit that area. I can pull up the podcast and be like, I interviewed a guy from Michigan. I'll go see what he told me I needed to do when I'm there. Because I've actually never been to Michigan. I've landed in the airport, which I know doesn't count. So I've been in, I think it was Detroit I landed in one time. So as a layover. But all right, I would some craft beer and then I go for a river walk. So thank you, C, for the suggestions. You knocked it out of the park. So diving into discussion today. So I know when we first talked to you, you mentioned about like Sacred Heart Academy's like renewal and like classical versus like liberal arts renewal and how they kind of run together. I'd love to kind of you dive into kind of what exactly is that when you're talking about this renewal that you guys had.
Yeah, Sacred Heart Academy has an interesting story. So I shared this before and I'll say it again. In one sense, we're 120 years old. We're an old school. They were Polish Catholic folks. Many of them worked in the gypsum mines. They wanted a good parish. They wanted an education for their children. They founded the school 120 or so years ago. About 11 years ago, we had so few students, we were talking about closure. The pastor at the time said, why don't we try something else? Instead of just doing the same thing we've been doing and then ending up closing, which has ramifications long-term for the parish itself. The thing they tried was especially two things, and these are, I want to talk more about them. But one thing was classical or liberal arts education, and the other thing was we got a bunch of homeschoolers around here, and how do we serve those families? Because we're a Catholic parish, we're a Catholic church, and part of our interest is who do we have, who's in our parish that we should be finding ways to serve. So the refounding or renewal of Sacred Heart School into Sacred Heart Academy was put those two things together. Let's build a homeschool hybrid program as part of the school, and let's think much more deeply about our own intellectual tradition. That's the liberal arts, the classical stuff, and really try to do that well and beautifully, and think that that's the best that we can do anyway. And then you can do some career training things later. Like we want to build the foundations.
Okay. I love that. So obviously it sounds like that's been going good because you guys went from you almost closed down. I know that's part of obviously y'all's story. So how do you go from almost closing down to, I think, are you guys doing good? Or are you guys doing bad right now? I know the answer, but like, how are you guys doing right now?
Yeah, from a numbers perspective, we had about 68 students in 11 years ago. So 2013, 2012. We now have about 380 students. So 2/3 of them are roughly in the full-time program, and then 1/3 of them are in the homeschool hybrid program. We call it CEC. So from just a numbers perspective, we're doing well. And it's been a success story in the last 11 years of that. That's a lot of growth in 11 years for a school, or even just from a physical perspective, we're at capacity. Like our building is full. Like literally, there's not an open classroom to put people in, even though we'd love to do it. So there's that aspect of it. From a deeper question of, I think, renewal. So if you think of success, not just in number terms, but in terms of people, like who do we have and what's happening? We don't have the exact numbers yet. We're working on it. But our alumni who are still Catholic, like that's kind of a metric for us, right? And just as a brief caveat, we're a Catholic school. I'll keep saying Catholic. I know there's non-Catholics who are listening to this podcast. Please just translate that into your own, faith tradition. That's good. But so that number is really, really high. Like 3/4 of our students are still Catholic or more. The average in Catholic schools in the United States is 30%. Whoa. So our number, I think, is more than double the average of what you might call sticky faith. Like how many of the kids who go through your school, by the time they're adults and get to make their own decisions, like they're not living with their parents, are they still having some kind of meaningful practice of the Catholic faith? We think that number is really, really high. So from another perspective of, are we doing the thing we're really trying to do, like form disciples of Jesus Christ? Yes. I think we're really doing that, and we're trying to do it in a beautiful way.
Hey, school success makers, Mitchell here. I just want to take a really quick break from the show to give a big, huge shout out to the Herzog Foundation. I absolutely love the Herzog Foundation. I've been friends and partners with them for a couple of years now, but we're bringing it to a whole new level. And I'm excited to share that our very own School Success podcast is now featured on the Herzog Foundation Podcast Network. The Herzog Foundation is a powerhouse of resources designed to support schools like yours, from free training events through the Herzog Foundation Institute to their incredible online news publication, The Lion, and of course, our new podcast, Home. They have everything you need to stay informed and inspired. And if you're dreaming of starting your own Christian school or co-op, don't miss their online course, Schoolbox. It's a fantastic resource to help you get started on the right foot. At School Success, we're proud to partner with the Herzog Foundation to bring you these valuable tools and insights. So visit herzogfoundation.com to explore all they have to offer. Trust me, you won't want to miss out on these amazing opportunities for growth and success. And I love all the people over there, and I know you guys will too. So please go check them out, and you won't be disappointed. Now, back to the show.
So a school that's listening that's like, man, I feel like we're struggling and we've been open a while. Maybe we need a renewal. We need a restart. Like, what would you say to a school that maybe is listening, thinking, maybe we should, that definition of insanity, type of like doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, and going like, man, maybe we should do something different. Like, kind of what would you say to a school that maybe is in that position that's listening right now?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think it's a hard place to be in, to know that your school's kind of been slowly declining, because that was our story. I think a few things. One is you have to know who's in your community, because culture really depends on people much more than policy. So the first thing I would say is, who is there and what has the Lord gifted them with that can be for the life of that community? I think that's the first thing, because the Lord people just showed up and helped to build. We're like, we needed a guy like this, and then he just suddenly showed up, and here he is. Like, that happened in our life. So that's a piece, is who's there, and trust in the Lord to put the right people there. I think a second thing is, the renewal process involves swimming against the grain. And that's true in a number of ways. One way is, most people don't have a liberal arts education. Most people went to public school in the 80s, parents who are in schools, right? They went to public school in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s. They weren't bad, but they weren't what Sacred Heart Academy is trying to do, and what I think many of the schools who are probably listening to this podcast are trying to do, in that the public schools in the 70s, 80s, 90s weren't trying to form disciples of Jesus Christ. They weren't convinced that Jesus is the center of gravity for history, for literature, for everything that we study. That's our conviction. So sharing that conviction in a way that's bold and compelling, knowing that some of your families either won't like it, that's possible, or, if I can say it this way, struggle to live in accordance with that reality. And that's the harder, like, swimming against the grain, is modern culture doesn't help you to do that. Like, you actually have to resist modern culture. So here's an example, which maybe many schools are already doing this, but, like, get rid of technology from your school. It's dumb. It doesn't help your students. It only harms their attention. Here's a key way that I think is hidden but is important. If you think, like, as a child, I have a question. What should I do with that question? Oh, I know. I should take out my phone and ask Google. Do you see how you've detached the authority of the parents from the life of the child? That's really problematic from a formation perspective. So it's not just that, like, it turns out when you look things up on Google, you'll forget them. That's true. It turns out Google maybe has some biases built into the algorithm. That's also true. But the really problematic thing is, your child will be trained to think that you, the parent, don't really matter that much, and your authority is not a big deal. If you want to convince them that Jesus matters and that this way of life as a Christian matters, you can't live that way, right? So that's an example, and we can talk more if you like, but that's an example of this swimming against the grain that you're going to have to do. So I think one thing is, again, who are the people? The Lord put them there. The Lord gifted them. Those gifts are for the sake of the community. I think a second thing is a bold and compelling vision that will be hard and that you have to be convinced is good. And then I think the third thing, and this is where your faith tradition matters a little more, the Catholic intellectual tradition is really long and really old. And so our bias at Sacred Heart Academy is we tend to read old things. Like, we don't read very many things that were written in the last, 50 years, 70 years. We don't even study that much history from the last, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years. We tend to do the older things as a way of saying, this is our story. This is how we've become this way as a people. And those people are your people. Like, you're one of those people, and you get to inherit that tradition and then stand on the shoulders of those giants and build something as an adult.
So I'd love to go back to the technology thing, because you brought up some good points that I have some questions on. So let's say a student comes up to a teacher and has a question about something, and the teacher doesn't know the answer. Should the teacher not pull out their phone to look up the answer and be like, hey, I'll get back to you later, and then go to the encyclopedia or go to something to look up the answer? Because I know for my son, if he'll come to me for a question, be like, that's a really good question. I don't know. Let's look it up together. And I'll pull it up on my phone and go, Milo, this is what the answer is. And be like, okay, thanks, Dad. I don't know all the answers, and I'm never going to, of course, feel like I, put on that I do know the answer. So how would you, have a teacher or a family handle a situation like that?
Yeah, I think it's a good question and a good insight that we seem to do that almost instinctively. So that's part of that swimming against the grain. Is like, oh, just look it up. Here you go. I think a better approach, and I'm not like a zealot and advocating like never look things up on your phone ever. Like I'm not saying that, right? That's not my position. I think it would be more like pondering for a while with the child. How would we find that? Or how would we figure that out? Like, let's assume Google's not an option and then try to figure out how to get there. And part of what that's going to do is filter, like, do you really need to know that it was in 1724 instead of 1725? Like, maybe you do. I don't know. It might be an important data point. But how would you get there? What would you look at? How would we ever know what the Pilgrims did when they landed at Plymouth Rock? Like, how would you know that in the first place? Oh, they wrote things? Can we read those things? How would we read those things? Where are they? Like that, walking children through reality is another way of saying that. Like, Google seems like magic, and that's part of the problem, is it doesn't help you understand how would you get there. Because what you actually want from education, I'm saying it sort of simply, but is you want to be the kind of person who knows how to get there, not just has answers at their fingertips. That's memorization is good, et cetera. But that, I think, would be the approach. And then I actually think it's good what you said of to have a teacher or a parent be willing to say, I'm not sure. Let me find out and get back to you. And I think that's a really satisfactory answer, even though you got to, get back to them, right? But I think that's good, because then children are empowered to do the same. Like, you don't have to have all the answers right now. You just got to be the sort of person who will either get there and know how to get there.
That's good. All right. No, I like that, because anytime I'm at church and a student comes up to me from youth or whatever, and they're like, hey, what do you think about this? If I don't know the answer, I'm not going to be like, I don't know, sorry. I'm not going to say that. I'll always say, that's a really good question. Actually, I do not know, but I'm going to find out the answer, or at least try my best to find the answer. Can I get back to you next week or whatever about it? Because at least leaves the one, now I'm going to learn something new, and two, you give it an excuse to get back in touch with them, which obviously schools can do the same thing for different things your students are asking. Obviously, you are the teacher, so they're coming to you for guidance, or at least we're hoping that they come to you for guidance, just like parents should be that for their kids. So I love that. Gives a good touch point, loving point for them.
Well, and think about the implications for education. So it's not just like stop giving kids iPads or Chromebooks. It's more than that. Like, here's a way of saying it. And I'll just use an example as a way of saying it. If you want your students to understand frogs, the best spot to do it is a pond where there's frogs. And the worst spot to do it is a textbook that gives them all the answers. Because you haven't taught them reality. You've just pretended like there's facts they should know and memorize and spit out on a test. And I'm not advocating like never give them tests about frogs. Like, study frogs and then give them tests, sure. But what I mean is, how would you know about frogs? Well, look, here they are. Like, this is what they do. Do you see them? Why don't you go get one and see what they're like? And some kids will be squeamish, and some kids will think that's awesome, and their uniforms will probably get dirty, and the parents will love you, and it's great, right? But part of that perspective is that's part of the whole educational approach, is how would you get there in the first place? So instead of thinking of education as transmitting this big, huge body of facts that kids have to know, think of it as, I want you to approach reality and start to love real things in a way that you want to know them. And then we'll certainly ask you to memorize along the way. I mean, we ask our students to memorize. But here's an example. Like, as part of that, our science program at Sacred Heart Academy up to 5th grade is very much about things that grow in Michigan, because we're in Michigan. And then when children are outside and you go for a walk in the woods, like my kids do this now. It's wonderful. It's beautiful. They're like, oh, that's an ash tree. That's an oak tree. Like, look at this leaf. I think that's a sugar maple. You're like, I didn't learn that at school. Like, it was all just in a book. And you're like, look at the book. Instead of like go outside and touch the trees and see them and examine their differences. So if you're a school in Arizona, maybe your science program up to 5th grade is about stuff that grows in Arizona, because that's where they are. And then if they move to Michigan, which is the best state in the union, they might not get all this stuff, right? And that's fine, because they're from Arizona. But they can learn. They'll be the kind of person who understands how to approach reality.
And being in nature is obviously so incredibly valuable for anybody, adults and kids, just being outside, not in front of a screen, not inside a building. So I love the hands-on stuff. That's how I learn too. I think I'm obviously not alone in that. I loved like let me touch and feel that thing that we're learning about. It really makes it stick better, which is why I do love the homeschool aspect. I love that you guys have that for your school. And so I would love to kind of touch on that real quick. I know that you got the classical side and the homeschool side. What made you guys decide to do that? I know you mentioned that there's homeschool, there's a lot of homeschoolers in our area. And obviously since 2020, I feel like there's even more homeschoolers across the whole country. So is adding the homeschool component maybe a simple enough solution that a school is like, man, we'd love to add a component of homeschool, but maybe we don't know how. I don't know if you want to maybe talk about what was it like adding a homeschool side that other schools who are listening maybe go, shoot, we should own or have a homeschool side of our school as well.
Hey, I just want to take a really quick break from the podcast to highlight one of our amazing partners and sponsors, ClassReach. If you're a new school administrator or founder and are struggling to keep up with all the hassles of planting a new school, like collecting tuition, communicating with parents, or handling student data, then you need ClassReach. ClassReach is the all-in-one software that helps with everything from admissions and tuition to classroom management and parent communications. Sign up for a free consultation with one of their school specialists and see how ClassReach can help your school grow today. You guys can check them out online, classreach.com. They are a kingdom-minded company, and I love their leadership team there. I've become friends with a lot of them. They truly are a great company. I support them, and I love them, and you guys will love them too. Check them out at classreach.com. Now, back to the show.
Great question. I think part of what we were talking about was the classical stuff. This is now in terms of homeschooling. So here's a couple of facts, and then I'll share a little about the story. One that I found really interesting a couple of years ago is that there are, in the United States, more students being homeschooled than there are in the Catholic schools. And I know that's a bit of an apple-orange because it's not Catholics being homeschooled, it's people being homeschooled. So it includes anybody, but it's an interesting, I think, data point or sort of fact of the matter. One of the realities for us with building a homeschool component that I think other schools might honestly think about is two things. One is homeschool families definitely think of themselves as being responsible for forming their children. And that's what you really want from school families. You don't want them to outsource to you, hey, school, do all the things, and then we'll hopefully we'll put them to bed and feed them while they're at home, right? That's not the model. The model is parents are primary educators. Homeschool families have a clear sense of that reality, which I think is good. So one piece of why do it is culture. Homeschool families help with culture. A second piece that I would invite school leaders to think about in terms of building a homeschool component or sort of a hybrid component into your program is that it can help with teacher formation. So here's an example. In our homeschool literature classes, we don't do a ton of grammar. We don't do a ton of writing. We expect that those things happen at home. At school, in our homeschool literature classes, we do a lot of things that are designed for what you can do in a classroom. So we do a lot of seminar discussions, we'll do debates, we'll do projects, we'll do that kind of stuff in a literature program in a way that serves the teachers and the students, because those students, that's what you can do in a school compared to a home. But those are also things we want them doing in the full-time program, in just the regular program of the school. So it helps with culture. It serves for teacher formation. Those are the two, I think, key reasons. One thing I do just want to point out or want to be clear about is it adds layers of complexity to your school because you have to schedule in some kind of funky ways to make it all work. You have to have some people here 2 days, some people here for us 5 days. It creates complexity, and you have to be willing to own that complexity and acknowledge this is hard, but it matters.
So Sean, you had mentioned about on our pre-interview call about the choir and hymns discussion, and that actually really intrigued me because I grew up with hymns in the church I grew up in. I actually didn't really love hymns until now in my adult years. I've heard hymns now again. I go, you know what? My goodness, hymns are just beautiful. The wording, and then just it brings back a lot of actually memories, and they're actually good memories of what I remember singing these as a kid. And so, but I'd love to hear what you guys are doing with hymns, because I know you kind of mentioned you do something specific at your school with that.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So our part of our approach as a Catholic school, and this could be a little bit unique or would need to be translated into other Christian traditions, but in the Catholic tradition, we have a long tradition of beautiful liturgy and beautiful music that goes along with that liturgy. The general name for that music is Gregorian chant. So what we prioritize at our school as an element of formation is we go to mass every day. So 5 days a week for about 45 minutes, we're going to mass. And part of our tradition is you don't just say the mass, you sing the mass. So we're teaching students. We have sacred music as a class in grades 5, especially through 9. And then optional, there's an elective you can take after that. We're doing a little bit in the classroom in the elementary program, grades 1 through 4, K through 4. The idea is there's something beautiful and formative about receiving what the Lord has to give, especially through music. And we think there's something about music that reaches the heart in this really beautiful, and like it's hard to say just why it does, but everyone knows that it does. And so our approach is to try to do that really well and beautifully as a school community, as a whole parish community, right? But as a school community, as a constitutive element of our formation. We want you to be the sort of person, in other words, who can enter into that sort of silence and rhythm and harmony of beautiful music and beautiful liturgy. And that's important for being a disciple of Christ in our estimation.
I love that. So I think that's so important. I think music is so important. My 5-year-old is finally, I feel like, getting interested in music just in general. I feel like for a while he's just not been super interested in it. So what I've done is I start just singing songs or singing a hymn that I've heard, and I'll just start singing it, and he'll finally go, "Hey, what's that song? I like that song. Can you play it on your phone?" And so then I'll like play the real song, and I'm like, "Okay, cool." He's like showing interest, and then I get to talk through, this is what the song means. Like, this is what the blood of Jesus is meaning when they're talking about it, or this is what the cross is meaning when they're talking about it. And like, it's been a really cool thing. So I'm glad you guys are incorporating that into your school, because music is so incredibly, obviously, important, and it's been around for a very, very long time. And I think a piece of that, for when you're talking about music, obviously it is a big deal, and I feel like it can be a small thing that you make into a big thing, which is good. But you mentioned something on our call before we did this one about you guys are really big on trying to make little things, making little things a big deal. And one of those I thought was interesting. You were talking about Halloween versus All Saints Day. I would love you kind of talk about that one, and maybe any other things you guys are making little things into big deals.
Yeah, so it is connected. So I appreciate you noticing that connection of beautiful liturgy. In the Catholic imagination, liturgy isn't just like you go to mass. It's really a whole set of feasts, of fasts. So right now, as this podcast is happening, we're in Holy Week. Lent is about to end. Easter is about to come. So that's a big deal. That example, I think, is a telling one of Halloween literally means the evening before All Hallows Day. And All Hallows Day is All Saints Day. So our approach is we actually want to celebrate All Saints Day and make it the big thing, and recognize Halloween really starts in the evening. And you're usually not in school in the evening, so we don't make Halloween that big of a deal on Halloween Day. We want to make the celebration of the saints into a big deal on November 1st. And then November 2nd for us is All Souls Day. So we actually have our high schoolers make a pilgrimage to a cemetery and pray for the dead, for example. So we try to really pattern our common life on the rhythm of the liturgy, and we try to do it in ways that subtly communicate to our students. Like, remember, Halloween is just the evening before the vigil of All Hallows Day, of All Saints Day. So let's make All Saints Day into a thing. So that's our approach.
Well, Sean, thank you for all of that. I want to ask you one final question, but before we sign off for today, I know a lot of this has been advice for school leaders that are listening, but we always love to end with the same question for everyone, which is, if you were to share one final piece of advice with the school leaders listening, what would that one piece of advice be?
My one piece of advice for school leaders is build a bold and compelling vision for your school, and convince people that being disciples of Jesus Christ matters most of all, I think. And again, I work in a Catholic school, so if you're in a charter, other schools, maybe there's a different reality for you. But for me, the reality of we're forming souls for Christ. We want people to go to heaven, and that matters most of all. That's the heart of the whole thing for us. So sharing that with families and then equipping and empowering them to try to do that in their homes so that your home and school, the cultures of those things reverberate or harmonize with each other. That I think is what makes schools really something beautiful and really something worth doing.
Well, Sean, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be on the podcast. I know you guys just got finished with your spring break last week, so I know you got a lot of stuff to catch up on, but just appreciate your heart, appreciate your time and your time that you've put into education all these years, but also just at your school for the last 2 as the headmaster. So wishing you guys nothing but the best. You guys continue to grow and burst at the seams at your school and educate the next generation, man. Appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the invitation, Mitchell. I really appreciate it.
Well, another huge shout out and a thank you to Sean for taking time and being on the podcast today. I love what he's doing there in Michigan. I'm wishing him nothing but the best as they continue to grow as much as they can, be in full and at capacity, and how they're educating the next generation. Wishing him nothing but the best as they do that. And again, appreciate his time being on the podcast today. And as always, I'm hoping you guys were able to take at least one thing away from today's episode that you can take back to your school to make it better than it is right now. And if you're needing help getting more information and growing your school or doing different things to make yourself better, we have 3 free resources we want to make sure you guys are aware of. And the first one is, of course, the podcast that you're listening to right now. We drop weekly episodes of the School Success Podcast every Monday morning. So make sure you're subscribed if you want to get updates of new episodes and what we have coming out. We want to make sure you guys are getting those. And if you love our content, we would love a 5-star review from you. The second resource is on our website, schoolsuccessmakers.com. In the top right-hand corner, there's a button called the School Success Report. We send that out every single week directly to your inbox with some different articles, teacher shout-outs, things that you guys should be reading to kind of keep up to date with where education is at right now. And we are making sure that you have one good email that you can read to kind of see where are things at. And we try and keep it short and sweet. So you can go through, read a couple articles that maybe stand out to you that you'd be interested in. So we want to make sure you are getting that in your inbox every single week. Last but not least, our private Facebook community on Facebook, of course, is School Success Makers. We want you guys to join that completely free, get connected with other school leaders across the country, ask questions, get some community in your life because we all need community. And sometimes it can be really hard to find community. And so this is a place for you to find people like-minded, just like yourself. So that's it. So if you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, or ideas, you can message us through our website, schoolsuccessmakers.com, and let us know, because maybe you have a potential guest that you think would be good for us, or maybe you think you'd be a good guest on the podcast. We'd love to hear from you and see if that would be a good fit or not. So other than that, we'll be back here next week with another awesome guest as usual on the School Success Podcast. We'll see you then. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of the Herzog Foundation.